The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of this weekend's BYU football and the new look Big 12 Conference. First and 12 is sponsored by Macy's Grocery Store. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
All right, everybody, hour number 2 of First and 12. Welcome on in. Alex Kirry, Mitch Harper. Mitch Harper still in the great state of Texas. I'm envious. Although I'm not envious of the travel day that you're going to have ahead of you, but it's always fun to be down there in the Lone Star State. As an atmosphere, though, how did you like the stadium? Bevo was in attendance. Bevo's always in attendance in his little pen down there. I know you were talking about how it's kind of an older stadium. It is. They just keep adding seats in there. Did they end up eclipsing that 100,000 that they were looking forward to this weekend?
They did, and they had 101,000 fans in the attendance, and that was
Nice.
the third ever BYU game with more than 100,000 fans. So it was a big crowd, big showing of BYU fans. It was just kind of a weird game in the fact that there wasn't much to get amped about. It never felt like the game was in doubt either. It was more Texas fans were kind of antsy with their team going, hey, punch it in on 4th and 2.
Right.
What's
Yep.
going on here? And BYU fans just didn't have much to really get pumped about. So, but it was fun, though. It was just the history in that venue. Big Bertha, that drum is massive.
Oh, yeah.
It was a lot of fun to be there.
What was it, the 700th hosting of a game there at that stadium? Like, that's
Yes.
This is a blue blood program, 700 games that they're hosting at their own place. I mean, you think about how many games that they've played, one of the storied programs in college football. We got to jump in here. We got tons of stuff going on here on the program with your second hour, of course. It's one of our set pieces that we love every week. We go through, we argue about it, we toss and turn over it every week. It is our Big 12 Power Rankings. Let's jump in right here.
The Big 12 Power Rankings Big Board. A weekly rank of all 12 programs, from the elite to the bottom dwellers.
All right, Alex, I'm going to throw a curveball on this one because we want to
really?
have the audience engaged on this throughout. I think we start at the bottom this week and work our way up to 1 because I think there's more suspense at the top. Who's going to be number 1 this week with a little bit of movement there at the top potentially. So let's start at the bottom, and we'll go with number 14, Cincinnati. They lose to Oklahoma State 45-13. They remain winless in Big 12 play. Pretty self-explanatory, keeping the Bearcats at the bottom.
We said the same thing last week, right? I mean, Coach Satterfield's got, a lot to figure out in his life, man. Like, it's not just – at this point, it's not just like your team. Then you start looking in the mirror going, who am I? What do I do? Am I a football coach? Am I supposed to be doing this? And when you're behind Houston now on a weekly basis, and we're now 2 weeks in a row that Cincinnati's been at the very, very bottom of this thing, it's not a good place to be. But there you go, another bottom dweller. Houston at number 13. I mean, they are making a run to be the very, very worst because 41-0 is about as bad as a. I mean, that's like Rice didn't even look that bad against Texas. Like, or this is. These are the types of numbers you get in the very front end of the season. You don't lay an egg, an absolute zero burger in the Big 12 if you're Houston, man. Dana Holgorsen, figure it out, brother.
And the ex-AAC teams round out the bottom 3. Number 12, UCF, who also, like Cincinnati, remains winless in league play after falling to West Virginia.
Baylor, of course, is at number 11. And, again, a lot of these bottom-dwelling teams, like they could switch around and be worse than one another on any given week. So I guess there's that. But Baylor just cannot find its footing, and I know they're trying to figure out stuff on offense. BYU's at least in that same category of, like, who are they on the offensive side of the football? But BYU certainly won a lot more games than Baylor has. I do want to say something about number 10 in this Texas Tech team. Now, they were on a bye. But I think that you almost make an argument that they could have shifted down this week after all the dadgum noise about spitting and like Joey McGuire calling another press conference and everybody had a heyday with it. We played that old Seinfeld clip of the magic loogie from Keith Hernandez on Kramer and Newman. And I'm telling you, that's what it felt like. Why spend time on this? And then everybody went back and found about 50 clips of different Texas Tech players spitting on people over the years. And I think we kind of figured out what their team's about. So there you go.
Yeah. Bad look
number
for
10
Texas Tech.
It was terrible. It was so dumb.
And their university issued a statement on it saying, we've now handled the matter internally, after Eddie Heckard came out and showed his film that he got spit on too. So not a good look at all. Speaking of Eddie Heckard, him and the BYU Cougars, they drop, but not much because those bottom teams are pretty bad. Number 9, BYU, moves down from 8 last week to 9. It feels maybe a little high, but still, you got to give BYU credit. They've won 2 games, which has been tough for newcomers to pull off.
Yeah, TCU is at 8 this week, and, they just kind of sit there, and there they are, and they haven't – I mean, obviously when they beat BYU and then had such a bad outing last week against Kansas State, because BYU has such a poor showing on the offensive side, I think we ended up putting them back there at that 9 spot, which is kind of where they've been, at the beginning of the season, that 9-10 spot. BYU's kind of finding themselves exactly where we thought they were. You know who hasn't, though, is West Virginia at number 7. I mean, Neil Brown and his guys, they go to Orlando and get the win. I mean, this is going to be a heck of a game next week in Morgantown. At least you hope so, because they just seem to be getting better every week. I mean, they're up and down, certainly, but I was not anticipating them going in and hanging a 41 at Orlando on UCF this week. I mean, my goodness, they're 5-3. They're a win away from being bowl eligible. Cool down the Neil Brown talk about getting fired that we all heard at the beginning of the season. No
question. And another team that's been a big surprise is at number 6, Iowa State. Eli Sanders, he rushed for a nice performance, 14 carries, 90 yards. Cartavius Norton as well. He chipped in another 58. Iowa State is just continuing to play just sound football, complementary football with both the passing game on the offense and defense. I mean, it's just kind of coming together. Matt Campbell has got to be really excited about the future of this program because they're the youngest team in the Big 12, and they're already, among the top teams this year contending for a Big 12 title. I mean, Iowa State controls their destiny to get to Arlington, so they sit at number 6, but, man, they are trending up as we move forward down the stretch run.
Yeah, and the only reason they're at 6 and not a little bit higher is because all the teams in front of them are all performing as well. By the way, to have that front end of the season weirdness with the gambling and all of that, you could have seen Iowa State just crumble and go, yeah, we got to figure our program out a little bit. No such thing. I mean, they're winning games even with those distractions. Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy, congrats, man. I mean, we apologize. Mitch apologizes. We got after you at the beginning of the year. I mean, maybe a little bit. But listen, we got after Oklahoma State because you're going, hey, man, we expect more out of Mike Gundy. But this is what we expect out of Mike Gundy, figuring things out. The team gets better as the year goes along, and they're going to get scary. They're going to beat Oklahoma in that Bedlam series. You watch, Mitch. And all you can hope is that maybe BYU can catch an exhausted Oklahoma State team at the end of the year. But the problem is they might be in the mix too. They might end up in some sort of a weird tiebreaker and in that conversation. And so they're going to need every one of those wins, including maybe putting one on BYU in Stillwater at the very end of the season. So Oklahoma State is your number 5 team there. And then Kansas at 4. We had a little back and forth about whether or not Kansas should be above Oklahoma State because Oklahoma State beat Kansas, but I think they earned their spot into that 4th slot this week, Mitch, because of that win over Oklahoma. It's probably one of the better wins in the whole conference this entire year.
No question. Number 3, Kansas State. They are looking great right now. 41-0 win over Houston, playing their best football at the right time. Chris Kleiman, he was confident coming into the year at Big 12 Media Days that, please sleep on us because we're going to be good again. It was kind of the vibes. And then you thought in the beginning of the year, you're like, oh, that might have been the wrong direction there, Kleiman. But
for sure,
don't doubt that guy out because 6-2, 4-1, and I still feel like they've even got more to be had with the way that they're playing. Really good stuff from Kansas State. And this is where it gets interesting, Alex. Who's going to be at 1 this week? Well, number 1, it's the Texas Longhorns. They go to the top spot after defeating BYU 35-6. That means Oklahoma slides to number 2. Do you agree with that? Do you think that's the right move there that we're pulling that switch?
I sent some strongly worded text messages about whether or not this should be the case, but I feel at peace now with it. Yes, because Oklahoma did beat Texas. I mean, and they have the same exact record. They have the same exact conference record. But when you talk about, just that immediate trending, what's going on right now, I mean, Texas is going to be ranked above Oklahoma this week, likely in, the college football playoff rankings when those roll out. So Oklahoma's going to have to do more, and you're going to have to see something. I mean, you could really see Oklahoma lose 2 more games in conference play. That's not a wild thing to say because they've been so bad on defense. And, I look at it and I go, could you imagine a Kansas State, Iowa State a championship game in Arlington after Brett Yormark, yelling from the tops of the mountains saying, thank heavens we don't have to have Texas and Oklahoma in that thing. But, if you would have said, Iowa State, Kansas State in the championship game, no way. But, I mean, those guys are both on their way. Kansas State has scored 41 in the last 2 weeks. They went 41-0 this week. They went 41-3 last week against TCU. Is this maybe the best team in the conference? We could end up putting them at the top of the list, all things said and done here.
And also, too, as we wrap this up, I mean, Texas, they've scored 30-plus points in each of their first 8 games. That's the first time in their history that they've ever done that. You think about all those Vince Young, Colt McCoy, Major Applewhite offenses. They never did what this Texas offense is doing, even though they got it back up in Malik Murphy, who looked at times shaky. But I still think that the talent around him is just top shelf, and they're going to be a favorite the rest of the way. They're going to get to Arlington. Texas is not going down, whereas I think you're right, Alex. Oklahoma looks like those issues showed up again where they could go down a couple times, maybe, in November if they don't turn things around.
I thought it was really rude you left Chris Sims off that list of Texas quarterbacks. How dare you? All right, we'll take the break here. We'll come back. We've got so much still to jump into. We've got our sound roundup for the week. We also have our whip around, of course, here regionally. All the teams that are going to be heading into the Big 12 next week. Boy, I wish it was next week. Next year, and how they fared this week. So stay with us. It is 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone. It is 102.7 FM at 1160 AM, KSL News Radio. And this is First and 12. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry. Back for more next. Stay with us.